The Minnesota Wild made a flurry of roster moves ahead of tonight's game against the Colorado Avalanche. Who's in, who's out, who's on IR? We take a look at all the moves as well as how the Wild stack up today on Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to today's bonus episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen every day. And just as a reminder, we are free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we recap all of the roster moves the Wild have made in the last 24 hours, including Jordan Greenway to IR, Alex Goligoski on the shelf for at least a week or two, as well as updates on Matt Zuccarello and Rem Pitlick in the COVID-19 protocol. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked on Wild, veteran Minnesota sports content producer with over a decade's worth of experience covering every team throughout the state of Minnesota. Happy to have you along, and as you can see, new backdrop, I'm actually at work, getting ready for a football game to call here later today, but wanted to bring a bonus episode into the fold, looking at some of the moves that the Wild have made to get some reinforcements up for the game against the Avalanche coming up here tonight at 8 o'clock. And so let's just dive right in and go right to some of the moves that the Wild have made here over the last 24 hours. Michael Russo, of course, has everything down. And we'll start with Matt Zuccarello and Rem Pitlick, who are on the COVID-19 protocol list. Matt Zuccarello and Rem Pitlick are confirmed COVID-19 positives, so they will indeed be in the protocol for at least 10 days. You have to be symptom-free before you can begin activity such as practice. And Russo notes that he's not sure if they're symptomatic or asymptomatic. So those guys will be on the protocol list for at least 10 days, and then after that have to be symptom-free before they can come back to practice and work their way back into the lineup. The Wild definitely miss those guys against the Seattle Kraken. Now, more roster moves to discuss. The Minnesota Wild have recalled rookie Adam Beckman and placed Jordan Greenway on injured reserve. Greenway was limping after the game following the Mark Giordano hit late in the game. Beckman will be it should make his NHL debut tonight after leading the Wild with 4 preseason goals. So just a refresher on IR with Jordan Greenway. He does have to stay on injured reserve for at least 7 days, which allows the Wild to fill that roster spot as opposed to just having to play shorthanded. So Beckman up, Greenway on the IR, Zuccarello and Pitlick in the COVID-19 protocol. Also, some defenseman notes to pass along. Alex Goligoski going to miss 1 to 2 weeks with an upper body injury, and Dmitry Kulikov with a lower body injury is considered day-to-day. So the Wild have recalled defenseman Calen Addison and reassigned John Lizotte to Iowa. So going to be without Goligoski for hopefully just a week, hopefully not longer. But at this point, Wild wanted to get a fresh skater up after Lizotte's debut against Seattle. So at this point, looks like we're going to go with Calen Addison for the foreseeable future. Now, how the lineup looks for the Wild tonight against the Avalanche, that remains to be seen. We will talk about some lineups that we could see tonight or that I would like to see against the Avalanche here in this one tonight. But just wanted to, again, kind of rehash the things that Beckman and Addison bring to the table. With Beckman, you're getting a guy who he's proven that he is a good goal scorer. He's not afraid to shoot the puck. And so he is going to bring a shoot-first mentality to this Wild team, which I think they definitely need. Beckman was great in the preseason for the Wild, so he should fit right in. And I think there is one spot that makes a lot of sense for him to go to help this particular player out. I think he needs to be the forward opposite of Kevin Fiala in this lineup. Now we'll talk about who centers those two, but I think with the fact that Beckman is not afraid to shoot the puck, I think that's an asset that can help take some pressure off of Kevin Fiala, who just at this point really needs some line mates to kind of help him out a little bit. So I would like to see Beckman go to that spot in the lineup. As for Calen Addison, a very gifted offensive defenseman coming up to play for the Wild. And, we saw him get a cup of tea last year. He is a guy who really brings a lot and can be a great asset, especially on the power play, which is going to be great because of the fact that Alex Goligoski is going to miss some extended time for this team. So could see Addison get some power play time, but at the very least, he's going to come up and be able to help take some pressure off of the top four defensemen, and may even slide into a top four defenseman role for this team in the near term. So some much needed reinforcements for the Wild, and don't be surprised if these guys are around longer than just to fill in for these injuries. I mean, if they play themselves into the lineup, then it's going to be hard to take them out of it. So we could be seeing both of these guys for the remainder of the season, depending on how things play out production-wise with some others. But that's just a look at what we have injury-wise for the Wild heading into the game against the Avalanche tonight. We will next take a look at some potential line combos that would benefit the Wild. That is coming up next here on Locked on Wild. This fall, Built Bar wants to help you celebrate freedom of choice. Did you know Built Bar has an amazing lineup of great tasting flavors? They have coconut, cherry barcia, raspberry mint brownie, double chocolate, salted caramel, strawberry orange, cookies and cream, and German chocolate. My favorite, for what it's worth, is definitely raspberry, but if you're not sold on that, want to try them all out, grab the mixed box. You'll get 2 each of those amazing flavors. Not only do Built Bars taste amazing, they are amazingly healthy too. Each Built Bar contains 17 to 18 grams of protein, ranges in calories from 130 to 180, contains only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, and only 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. Amazing tasting, amazingly healthy. What's not to like about Built Bar? So head to built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off of your order. Again, use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Continuing today's episode of Locked on Wild, thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen every day. And again, apologies, I know there is some shadow in the video over most of my face in a different setup and didn't really have any sort of light to project. So we'll make it work. Just wanted to get a bonus episode out here before the start of tonight's game with all of the changes that the Wild made in the on the roster, which we discussed in segment 1. Now let's try to figure out what this lineup looks like for the Wild heading into tonight's game. So obviously Beckman in, you've got Greenway to IR. So let's just start with the top line. You've got Kirill Kaprizov. Now he has been with Joel Eriksson Ek, and I've gone back and forth about this since the news that that Greenway was going to be put on IR broke yesterday. Obviously, you want Greenway to be or you want Joel Eriksson Ek, I should say, to be the top center, or the hope is that he can be the top center for this team. The fit hasn't necessarily worked with Kaprizov the way we would like it to. And so I think what we will see, or what we should see, is a promotion for Ryan Hartman. Have him center Kirill Kaprizov, because Hartman is arguably playing the best of any Wild player right now. So go Kaprizov, Hartman, and then for the forward that plays opposite of Kaprizov on the top line, I It wouldn't. I don't think it would be a bad thing to put somebody with a little speed on that far side. I would go with Brandon Duhaime, I think, on the opposite side of Kaprizov. See if he can handle that. His speed, I think, will help take a little pressure off of Kaprizov. And Hartman, like I said, is just playing the best of anybody on the roster right now. So I think I would try that for the top line here tonight. As for the second line, I go Marcus Foligno, Joel Eriksson Ek, and then I'm giving Freddie Gaudreau that other forward spot. I think he has a lot of things that could really help out that line in the short term, and maybe not necessarily as physical as Greenway is, but still very adept at stealing the puck from opponents. And so I would go Foligno, Eriksson Ek, and Gaudreau on that second line. Then I think you go Fiala, Sturm, and Beckman. I think as your third line, a lot of speed in Sturm in the center position, and then you've got Fiala and you've got Beckman. I think that could be very good here in this one tonight. And then for the fourth line, I think you go Bjugstad, Rask, and either Kyle Rao or Connor Dewar, or maybe you go Bjugstad, Dewar, Rao, something along those lines. But I think that would be your fourth line combo for the Wild here in this one. Feel free to suggest changes to that combination, but I think that would work pretty well for the Wild here in this game tonight if they go with those lines. But it's anybody's guess as to whether or not they actually will. And then on defense, I mean, you've got Spurgeon and Brodin. Then you go Dumba and probably just so that you get a little more defense. Although, actually, I take that back. Here's what I'd like to see, because we saw it last year. When Calen Addison came up, he was playing with Ryan Suter, so he's capable of playing those top line minutes. I would go at least with pairings. Now you can vary as to how everybody plays, just to try to balance it out a little bit more. I'd go Spurgeon, Addison, then I would go Brodin and Dumba, and then I go Merrill and Ben. I think as your bottom D-line pairing here tonight. It's not ideal because that third line D pairing was not good against the Seattle Kraken, but there really isn't a great short-term fix for that spot. So I think that's what I would do here for tonight. Obviously, it would not shock me at all if we get something completely different, but I think Addison in getting paired with Ryan Suter last year when he was up, I think it makes all the sense in the world to just throw him into that spot so that you then are able to keep Dumba and Brodin together on that second line pairing, and then that takes a little pressure off of that third line. I could also see it if they want to go to that top pairing of Spurgeon and Brodin, but I think those guys are so good defensively that it makes sense to pair an offensive-minded defenseman with them so that then you have that nice counterbalance. So we'll see if that's what Dean Evison elects to go with. Maybe he's listening today. You never know. We'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, that's what I'd go with for the line pairings here, at least for tonight. Subject to change depending on what Dean Evison is feeling like heading into the game. As far as goalie play, I would be shocked if we don't see Cam Talbot here tonight, coming off of a really good start against Seattle. I think you're going to get plenty of play next week with Capo, because the Wild do have a back-to-back at the end of the week. I think they play Saturday, Sunday next week. So there's not going to be any, there's not going to be any sort of a long delay in the next time that we see Capo Kakinen out on the ice. So I think you just go with Talbot for now. Let him build off of a really good start against the Kraken and try to get a win against the Colorado Avalanche, who are off to a very slow start so far this year, which we'll talk about here coming up in just a bit. But as far as the schedule goes for next week, you go Tuesday, Saturday, Sunday. So you could even go Talbot today, Talbot on Tuesday, and then probably go with Kakinen at home against the New York Islanders. I would like to see Talbot get the start at Pittsburgh on Saturday of next week. So we'll see how that shakes out. Obviously, the starting goalie position subject to change. So we'll see who's in net tonight, and if the Wilds can finish the month off at 6-2, like I had predicted that they will. But we will finish today by just talking about some of the keys to beating the Avalanche tonight, and if the Wild are going to be able to do that or not. We'll finish today's bonus episode of Locked On Wilds next. BetOnline.ag is back, and they are better than ever. They've got a new web interface for the start of the NBA season, plus more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline.ag remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. So head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive that welcome bonus. From basketball, football, baseball's World Series, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline.ag is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline.ag, where the game starts. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. Going to keep this last segment a little short. We're not going to go the traditional 30 minutes here today. Just trying to get a little something that can kind of combo platter with all of the roster moves the Wild have made since yesterday, as well as a look at what the Wild need to do in order to beat the Avs here tonight. Now, looking at the Avalanche, who come in with a record of 3-4, obviously they missed a bunch of early games, well, 2 to be exact, from the arguably one of the best players in all of hockey. And so it will be interesting to see what this Avalanche team looks like now. You look at their play to start the year. They beat the Blackhawks 4-2 to open the season, then lost to the Blues, the Capitals, and the Panthers. And so after a 1-3 start, they beat Tampa Bay 4-3 in a shootout, then lost to the Golden Knights 3-1, and then beat St. Louis 4-3 on Thursday. So starting to play better. They're 2-1 in their last 3 games. And I don't think I need to necessarily take a look at Nathan MacKinnon's stats against the Wild in his career to tell the story because, well, they're substantial. So obviously one of the keys is to, I don't know if you can fully contain MacKinnon, but at least try to slow him down a little bit. But this is the problem in running into this this Avalanche team is that they are so good up top. I mean, these line combos that they are able to throw at you, at least the top 2 lines. Now, beyond that is the spot where I think the Wild are able to, take advantage a little bit. But you go Landeskog, MacKinnon, and Burakovsky, Logan O'Connor, Nazem Kadri, and Sampo Ranta as your top 6. That is more often than not going to be the best line combos on the ice, opponents or otherwise. So it's going to be a very tall order for the Wild to try to contain that. And I don't know that you can necessarily fully shut those guys down. And so for the Wild, the biggest thing for them is going to be to try to keep pace through this game, especially if those lines get hot. And this offense has not. This offense has been very uneven so far this year, and so it's going to be a tall order for this Wild team tonight to try to contend with the Avalanche. But I think, especially if we get a little more balance, I think the Wild have a good shot here tonight. Obviously, top-line defense is incredibly good for the Avalanche with Bowen Byram and Cale Makar. But, they're deep defensively as well. And you've got to be able to get to the likes of Darcy Kemper if he is indeed the one that starts tonight. The Wild have had good history against him in the past, albeit with him on the Coyotes. So it's going to be a tough game tonight, but if the Wild can avoid that stretch that they had against the Kraken, midway through the first period to the end of the second period where they just looked completely lifeless, if they can avoid that, that's going to go a long way for this team. The other thing, we just have to stop with the penalties. They just have to stop taking so many penalties. The penalty kill was great against the Kraken. That's not necessarily going to be the case every time you get into a situation where you're taking that many penalties, which has been basically every game so far this season. And so you got to be more selective. You got to be disciplined, and we got to avoid the the lazy hooking penalty calls and things along that line. If the Wild are going to stay in this game, so it's going to be a tall order, as I have said multiple times. Going to be a tall order here tonight. But if the Wild can just eliminate the dumb penalties that they've taken so far this year, if we can get Kirill Kaprizov or Kevin Fiala to step up in this game tonight, if we get another good one from Cam Talbot, if he is the one that starts here this evening, and if we can get to Darcy Kemper early, kind of rattle him, get him off his game, that's going to go a long way. And hopefully the Wild pick up the win so that we can, on Monday, talk about how this team finished off the month of October with a 6-2 record, despite playing not super good hockey for a good majority of the season so far. So it's anybody's guess what we see. If we see a lifeless start, this will probably be another loss for the Wild. But if they can play inspired like they did against Seattle and not lose it, then we may be seeing the Wild be able to get to the Avalanche here, especially with them with an uneven start. So should be a fun one tonight. We will, of course, break it down for you on Monday with Alex Micheletti for another Micheletti Monday. But until then, just hang out and check out Locked on Wild on Twitter. We'll keep you up to date throughout the game. Of course, I will be tweeting throughout the game as well at Seth Topes. And make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And also make sure to check out all of our social media, Locked on Wild on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Now that your first listen here today is done, make sure to head over to any of our previous episodes from earlier in the week to stay up to date on all of the latest with the Minnesota Wild. You can find new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.